Do we need to reconvene first officially?
Oh, great question.
If we're not, are
Yeah.
we live? Yes.
Hey, Bill. Bill,
Yes, we're live.
can you cut us off live for a second? Do we need to cut off live, Amy?
You know what? Somebody just make a motion.
Make a motion to reconvene into, into open session, open meeting.
Second.
Great. Perfect. Roll call vote, please, Sherry. You're
Oh,
on
she's
mute.
muted.
Ms. Clendenin,
Yes.
Mr. Addison,
Yes.
Mrs. Dahl,
Yes.
Ms. Keller,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn,
Yes.
Mr. Khan.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. And thank you, Keita, for catching that. It crossed my mind at the moment it came out of your mouth. For those who happen to be watching live right now, we had an executive session prior to this open meeting of the Board of Education, and we neglected to adjourn that session and come back into open session. So that's what that was all about. We are now, I believe, live. This is an open meeting of the Board of Education. Obviously, things are a little bit different this evening. Hope that you will bear with us as we test this new technology and new way of communicating with each other as well as with the public. As with most Board of Education meetings, they are board meetings, meaning that board members discuss amongst themselves, but and there is an opportunity for public comments. However, the board does not respond to public comments or interact directly with the members of the public who are in attendance. And so in order to be able to have this meeting and make some of the important decisions that need to be made while also staying safe and healthy, we decided that the best way to do this was to do a virtual meeting, which is what we're doing via Zoom, but also to make sure that we were able to get public comments as we do at all meetings, but particularly want to make sure we have them at this point, given the significance of the decisions that are being made. That said, this, particularly the boundary line issues is something that the board's been talking about and has been on very much in the public's eye since before, since last semester at the latest. So for tonight's public comments, we asked that members of the public submit them in advance in writing so that nobody had to leave their house and come and be too close to other people. And so several people did that. We received comments via email. And what we're going to do now is we're going to read the comments that we received, and we're just randomly, board members are going to read the comments aloud so that they may be heard by anyone who may be watching this live right now. They will also be maintained in the correspondence log, which is available on the district's website. All right, I am going to mute myself now and let Joe, and we're just they're in no particular order, we're gonna read the comments that we received.
Okay, I have a comment from Hannah Preston at 307 Park Road. Dear WGSD board members, dear parents of a second grader at Avery and 2 younger children in daycare, and saw that elementary redistricting is still on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting. We are writing to express our support for the committee's recommendation. The survey shows a critical mass of others support it too. Walkable neighborhood schools have community buy-in and are what we expected from Prop E. The committee developed 2 options that take that approach while balancing utilization and appropriately recommended the one that offers better safety and SES balance. The comment in connection with the February 24th meeting asked you to consider reverting to scenario 1 to address some neighborhood concerns. While we empathize and hope there can be a solution, adopting scenario 1, which the committee rejected, is not it. You likely understand the nuances between the maps better than anyone by now, but please remember, the recommendation protects elementary children by eliminating the need to cross Brentwood and Elm between Clark and Edgar Road, as opposed to scenario 1. Brentwood is a busy 4-lane thoroughfare, especially at morning rush hour. Unfortunately, children do have to cross it under the current lines. Making Givens a neighborhood school provides an opportunity to eliminate that issue and improve significantly on the status quo for safety. The recommendation does so. Scenario 1 does not. The same dozens of children who would be crossing Brentwood in scenario 1 to go to Givens are blocks away from Avery, their current school. Thus, adopting scenario 1 would not eliminate the situation where some children have to travel farther than before or even zone to their third closest school. It would only move the issue from one neighborhood to others. The reality is all the maps, not just the recommended one, had some pockets zoned to their third closest school. It's unfortunate from a proximity standpoint, but it seems inevitable unless you are willing to accept less balanced utilization. If not, then the committee's work shows the only options under a neighborhood schools approach are to skew the New Givens boundary line, the recommendation, or east, scenario 1. The recommendation better promotes a safe short walk for children who are highly likely to walk to school and offers better SDS balance. Scenario 1, of course, had the largest SDS disparity of any of the other options. We appreciate all the hard work, sensitivity, and thought that has been invested in this process. Thank you for your consideration and your commitment to focus on the best interests of all children. I also have one from Joshua Trampier and Jennifer Starbird at 743 East Jackson Road. Dear Dr. Simpson, please extend our thanks to your team for this bold, compassionate move to provide meal service for our community's children. You may receive criticism for this, but know that you have our full support. For perspective, when our house was reassessed this year at what we thought was an unreasonably high value, we suppressed our fleeting desire to protest it. This is because we knew the bulk of those funds would go to the school district, which is something we wholeheartedly support. We're proud to think a small fraction of those funds are helping to provide a small safety net for kids whose parents may be unexpectedly out of work. Thank you for your service. Best wishes. And lastly,
And
Keita, do you have yours?
I do, yes,
Okay.
I have mine. My first one is from Eric and Suzanne Pearson on Algonquin Wood Place. Members of the Webster Groves School District Board of Education, we, as members of the Algonquin Wood Place neighborhood, understand a growing community presents unique challenges in serving several communities and its families. We, along with the board, desire the most successful redistricting plan, implementation, and school. That said, we have concerns regarding the Webster Groves School District Board's upcoming vote to adopt option 2 with changes over other options presented to the board regarding elementary school redistricting. The neighborhood appreciates the WGSD BOE's time and effort to promote local schools, and we recognize the need for the neighborhood near Givens Elementary to establish a school. Our concerns rest upon making the school as successful as all of the others within the district, which we have come to expect. Among the concerns of our neighborhood is the rezoning of our children into a school with a higher degree of need based upon SES with no demonstrated plan for how to support this need. As a result, we are anxious regarding its success given the documented higher need of 29% free and reduced lunch count. As none of the other schools in the district will have this level of need, it is clear that the school will require additional financial support to promote the success of its pupils. At this time, the school board has made vague statements about wanting to support the school with no clear commitments. This leaves us concerned. As parents of children who are already enrolled in WGSD schools, we are aware, for example, of the importance of fundraising by a school's parent-teacher organization in Webster Grove schools to obtain resources. It is unclear how a new school with no tradition of a PTO would be capable of matching the similar level of funding provided by families when they have fewer financial resources with which to begin. A second concern regards the accuracy of the information regarding the development of the plan. This is in part a concern for the neighborhood because of changing demographics within our neighborhood. Within the last 5 years, we have 3 times as many children approaching kindergarten, and we do not believe this change in demographics was accurately projected by the consulting firm. Members of our neighborhood with young children and our families without children have not received the same level of information as those families who are currently enrolled in the district, nor have they felt their needs were consulted in this process. The current proposed plan may address the initial goal of redistributing students around the district. However, it falls short of other stated goals for the district. As is the case with all families in Webster Groves, we would like children, regardless of neighborhood, to be set up for success. Many in the neighborhood have supported Bristol over the years and chose our neighborhood in part due to the reputation of Bristol Elementary. If the current proposal is voted on, then our neighborhood also requests that the Board of Education outline a specific plan for how the district will support a school with higher need in the area so that all elementary schools are successful and equally desirable to those moving into the district or considering a move within the district. Elementary school success impacts neighborhood choice, and we have a commitment to maintaining a successful neighborhood and community, including the school our children are zoned to attend. We believe in supporting public schools and would request that our neighborhood also experience support in the upcoming Board of Education's vote. The second comment is from Hannah Bingaman at 50 Hart Avenue. Dear Board of Education, I beg you to vote no tonight on the proposed school zoning plan. The proposal does not have the majority support in this community. The current proposal creates a haves and have-nots school zone using the awful historic symbolism of the train tracks as the divide. 34% free lunches in one school is deplorable. We can do better than this. The train tracks cannot be the divide here. Kids have been crossing over the tracks for school years. For school 4 years. Specifically, taking 220 kids from one elementary school, Bristol, is so beyond disruptive, especially considering the fact that it was divided up between the highest socioeconomic houses on one side of the tracks and the lower socioeconomic households on the other side. It is understandable that kids in North Webster should not need to be divided between all the elementary schools across Webster. But the North Webster area could certainly be divided in two, with some going to Bristol and some going to Gibbons, and then taking some of the high socioeconomic homes across the tracks and zoning to Gibbons. Equity goes both ways. The push for the zoning is about community schools. In this plan, many families like myself were taken from 0.9 miles at Bristol to 1.5 or even 3 miles to Gibbons. So there's no reason some in North Webster could not still be zoned to Bristol and some across the tracks be zoned to Gibbons. This is the same distance to walk as many of us have been given in the current proposal, and it would create two 15% schools. There is no doubt the new school will be well funded and a great school, but the zoning needs more work and needs to be divided in an equitable manner. Kirkwood would never vote yes to put their lowest socioeconomic students in one school. 5 out of 6 school board members live in the zones completely unaffected by this rezoning. If you vote yes on this, you are voting to create your own have schools and pushing many to a have nots across the tracks. I don't think anyone would agree that this is an equitable decision. I beg of the board to take a little more time and make this better for all of us, especially at a time that is so tough on families.
Thanks, Keita. I have, oh no, David's next.
Just trying to, I'm just trying to take the video off. Sorry. My apologies. All right, I mean, you're not going to be able to see me. I don't know if that's a big deal there. All right, so yes, so the first comment is from Jim McCowan at 27 Algonquin Wood. I'm appalled at what the Webster Groves School Board redistricting policy. They're clearly trying to pull a fast one on us, and were it not for the Webster Kirkwood Times article, this would have been done with little or no input from the public. My concerns and observations are as follows. 1, why is it that all of the affected individuals are not Webster residents? Why are residents of Webster Park and or Sherwood Drive area not impacted by the proposal? Why aren't all areas of Webster facing some sort of impact from this dramatic change? 2, how will the district compensate us for the loss in property value due to this change? The distance from our neighborhood to the new school is significantly greater, and Bristol has been a great selling point for a long time in our neighborhood. The loss of these two benefits will have a very negative impact on our property values. 3, I would assume that that the same amount of money has been spent per student, the facilities are of similar quality, and the teachers have comparable qualifications. So somehow the district has not taught in a style that is getting through to the children in order for them to do better on standardized tests, and or the lack of parental involvement is also contributing to this problem. 4, clearly the district is going to be mixing children with dramatically different knowledge levels, which can only lead to one of two outcomes. Either the more advanced children will be held back and not allowed to reach their full potential, or the other children will not be allowed to keep up and will be left behind. I'm certain the standardized test results will show some improvement on average because of the addition of the more advanced students. If you break out the results, you'll find that the students who've done poorly in the past will continue to do so in the future. This proposal has been poorly thought out, and the school board should be ashamed of their lack of transparency and should expect to face very strong opposition. I have a comment from Nancy and Jim McCowan at 27 Algonquin Wood Place. Our sentiments are the same as our neighbors. There is no racial or other concern besides property values and taxes. Webster School District gets a large portion of our taxes, one of the largest taxation rates in the country, and we don't feel we're getting the representation we should. The number of small children in our street is growing quickly, and these children need to be represented. I think there should be another alternative. Go back to the drawing board. And then a comment from Katie Rich at 422 North Bompard. I am in favor of the new proposed boundaries as they seem to encourage walking neighborhoods and place the lowest burden on residents of any particular neighborhood. Here are 2 ideas to improve socioeconomic dilemmas that the new boundaries may present. First, what about pooling resources from all the PTO organizations across elementary schools and splitting them equally? I think that many parents would be in favor of this, no matter what side of the economic fence they are on. It would equalize resources for those schools that are more economically disadvantaged and allow those that are more economically privileged to support our neighbors. Also, what about doing more joint school field trips or even field trips to other schools to allow kids from different neighborhoods to mingle more? For example, what if one specific grade level from 2 separate schools went on their field trip together? Or likewise, what about taking field trips to another school to do a joint activity? I know my son was supposed to go to Bristol for a Project Plus field trip. Can more class-wide field trips be planned to another school? I'm thinking there must be other ways to develop social diversity while still fostering neighborhood schools. Perhaps more ideas can be brainstormed on this front. Thanks. Christine, you're up.
Thanks, David. So Scott Duffy, who lives at 169 West Kirkham Avenue, says as far as the boundary lines for the schools being redrawn down Lockwood, I see it doing a huge disservice to Webster. In essence, I believe it will further the racial and economic segregation of Webster Groves. If one thinks, quote, it doesn't matter, they are both Webster schools after all, I would love to see the PTO funds raised by Bristol versus Givens. This is simply a case of the mostly white, higher economic, socioeconomic class in South Webster trying to push out everyone else. Susan Dibble, whose grandkids live on Marshall Place. My grandchildren live on Marshall Place in Webster Groves and will attend Bristol School in August 2020 as a 5th grader and a kindergartner. For that reason, I have followed the elementary boundary redistricting scenarios and discussions and believe I have a stake in the discussions. My family and I supported the original scenario 2 for the following 3 reasons. 1, Marshall Place is closest to Bristol School and kept the children in closest neighborhood school. 2, the walk from Marshall Place to Bristol is only 0.3 mile and takes 7 to 8 minutes. 3, the children cross only 2 streets, Moody and Lockwood, to get from Marshall Place to Bristol School. Because of change 3, I do not support the revised scenario 2 boundaries that take Marshall Place out of the Bristol School boundary and into the Givens School boundary for the following reasons. 1, Givens is not the neighborhood school for Marshall Place. 2, to get to Givens from Marshall Place, children will go from walking 0.3 mile in 7 to 8 minutes to walking 1 mile in 20 to 25. 3, walking to Givens from Marshall Place requires children to cross 8 streets instead of 2. 4, additionally, children will have to cross Kirkham Avenue, that in my opinion is just an extension of Brentwood Boulevard. to get to Givens. I am concerned for children to cross Kirkham as other stakeholders were for children to cross Brentwood to get to Avery. The area bounded by Kirkham to the north, the railroad tracks to the south, Gore to the west, and Elm to the east was cited as a potential growth area in change number 3. As I walk around and visually observe the area and study a map, I see no potential growth. The streets in that large chunk of change number 3 are already built up with homes on Marshall Place, North Elm, and Pacific. It seems to me that Marshall Place was broad brushed into the area of potential growth and development that has been in the city news and is to the west of Gore Avenue, bounded by Rock Hill to the west, Kirkham to the north, Gore to the east, and the railroad tracks to the south. The area now has businesses, a church, and empty land. Again, the area between Gore and Elm is already built up with homes and a preserved nature area, and it provides little area for growth potential. For the above 5 mentioned reasons, I do not support the revised scenario 2 with change number 3, nor do I support any plan which would move future Marshall Place children from Bristol to another elementary school. I believe that children who live on Marshall Place or any street in the district should be able to attend the elementary school that is closest to them, whether or not they will be enrolled in K through 5 for the 2021 school year. Alex, you're up.
All right. So starting with Amy Rich, 658 East Pacific Avenue. Hello, my name is Amy Rich, and I'm the parent of a 3rd grader at Avery Elementary. We appreciate everything the district is doing to keep our community safe during this uncertain time. I'm writing to let you know that my family and I feel strongly that school should be continued as online-only learning through the end of the year. We do not know at this time when or exactly how COVID-19 will affect the St. Louis area, but we should be prepared for this to be an area of extreme concern for the next few months, especially if we look at the timeline of the virus in China. We have all had to make unexpected and difficult changes to our lives and livelihoods in the past week. Although it has been stressful and trying, we feel that the only way to protect ourselves and our community is to follow the CDC guidelines of social distancing. We are concerned that should school resume, we will look back on this crucial moment with regret, a chance I am not willing to take. We are not blind to the fact that this is a difficult decision with many factors, but we are highly discouraged at the lack of direction and action the state has offered during the initial rise of the pandemic. We are urging the district to take the lead and make the difficult but unnecessary precautions regarding this deadly virus. We are urging you to continue online-only learning through the end of May. We are dedicated to working closely with our teacher and providing our son the best experience we can under the circumstances. Thank you for your time. All right, the next one is Jacob, and I'm gonna butcher his last name, so I'm just gonna spell it out. Budde at 24 Denver Place. I find it troubling that a district that claims to be as progressive as Webster Grove School District would put in place a plan that is a clear example of segregation along income lines. It is clear from the proposal that there will be an inordinate amount of middle and higher income families and students in the majority of the elementary schools, while one much more heavily than the other of the schools will have the majority of the lower income families that reside within the Webster Grove School District. This is not a good plan for students because it will leave the school district heavily segregated and with unrealistic populations represented for our students. There is no reason not to vote on this in a way that allows a more equitable distribution of resources. You'll know you've succeeded when simple metrics such as number of children on free reduced meals are not ridiculously skewed at one school in the district. If the board cannot see the bias in a decision like this, then I suggest that the board itself is acting in racist and discriminatory ways. Placing the majority of low-income students at one school and high income at others does not represent if you're going to move forward with this proposal, please provide explicit details about how you plan to support the students with equity at the lower income schools and not just by the number of students that attend there. They will need more administrators, more counselors, and more educational specialists than any other school. In case you've forgotten, the year is 2020, rather than 1920. I expect better. We as a community demand better. Amy?
All right. First up, I have a comment from Crystal Lapolito at 521 BAHIA Drive. My name is Crystal Lapolito, and I have a sophomore at Webster Groves High School and a 7th grader at Hickson Middle School. Regarding COVID-19, at this time, I'm unwilling to send either of my children back to school after the spring/COVID-19 break. My husband worked at UMass Biologics, crafting vaccines for SARS and the H1N1 flu prior to our move to my home state of Missouri, where my husband is now a decontamination specialist for the Steris Corporation, which produces decontamination products, equipment, and machinery for hospitals, food production lines, and other companies that require sterile environments. At this stage of the virus's presence in Missouri, it is the recommendation of my 7th grader's pulmonologist and her father that she be kept out of the public at all costs. She's an asthmatic, and contracting COVID-19 would be perilously dangerous for her. My daughter's teachers cleared her school lockers last week as part of Hickson's grab and go. She wore full protective gear. My daughter witnessed one 8th grader pushing another who landed on the floor in spite of the very clear directions given to students regarding the collection of their belongings. If students can't observe social distancing and no contact in an empty school, I have no confidence that students will do so should classes resume. Missouri has been listed as one of the 7 states doing the bare minimum to curtail the spread of COVID-19. While we are learning more and more on a daily basis, the science of a pandemic cannot be ignored. Resuming classes exposes students to life-threatening risk. Consequently, it also exposes people in the homes of students. It takes only one infected student to ravage an entire school. As for my sophomore, she has no existing health issues that would aggravate COVID-19. However, I cannot allow her to catch, carry, or transmit the virus via interaction with crowds, namely a building full of fellow high schoolers. I would keep her home for the remaining weeks of school for her own safety as well as that of her asthmatic sister. As a cancer survivor who underwent chemotherapy and as an asthmatic and diabetic, I too am more susceptible to viruses. I will not place my children in a position that would inevitably invite COVID-19 into our home. The COVID-19 pandemic has created a whole new way of living to which we are all trying to find ways to adjust. It is my hope that the Webster Grove School District administrators are as dedicated to the health of their students and the population at large as they are to the students' educations. Where COVID-19 is concerned, remote learning might be an inconvenience, but it would also be in the best interest of the entire school community at this time. Most respectfully, Crystal Lapolito. Next one is from Jean Galloway at 611 Lilac Avenue. Regarding the COVID school closure, once it is safe to return to school, can we continue with makeup days into the summer? We could turn the spring break into summer break, then start up again. Final comment from Robert Preston at 307 Park Road. Dr. Simpson, good morning. Thanks so much for your continued leadership throughout the pandemic. We appreciate your helpful communications and pragmatic approach. We noticed the agenda for Monday's school board meeting provides Dr. Simpson will present a recommendation for revised elementary boundary lines and the phases of implementation for board approval. Has the recommendation been revised since February 24th? If so, will a copy of the revised recommendation be posted prior to the hearing? Stay safe and best regards. All right, that is all of our public comments. I am confident that we will get some answers to those questions during the remainder of the meeting and hopefully address some of the concerns raised as well. I do want to point out that although we typically have public comments at the beginning and the end of our meetings due to a variety of extenuating circumstances of which you're all aware, we're just going to do them at the beginning of this meeting. We won't do them again at the end. We read them all at the beginning. However, obviously, if anybody wants to submit a comment, you're welcome to do so via email to Sherry, Dr. Simpson's secretary, or you can also give her a call. Okay, next on our agenda is the board calendar and correspondence log. Those are typically routine activities. Dr. Simpson, do you have anything that you would like us to discuss?
Nothing to discuss, just of course, everybody knows with a lot of the cancellations as a result of the COVID-19. And so there's some items on the calendar that have just been postponed or canceled. Some of them tentatively appear later on the calendar. But again, you're aware of those, so nothing big.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Then next up, I'm sure you have a lot to share with us regarding the district's response to the pandemic.
Yeah, it's been quite a few weeks here, and I'm going to invite my team to hop on here and give them an opportunity to share just a few minutes from their work and perspective, things that have been done. And I can't thank them enough for their proactivity. I've seen their approach for weeks now, as we anticipated that we were going to close for a little bit, based on what we were hearing, what we were seeing locally as well as around the country. We felt that the closure would be longer than the first few weeks. And Chris and Sandy and Pam and John and Kathy and Tim, everybody that's a part of the team has done a lot. I will say too that it has been a regional effort, which is something that I've been excited and enthused to see. And that we are not experts in disease control. Our work is education, working with children. And so there's been, for a long time, we didn't have answers, and we continued to seek guidance. And ultimately, we kind of organized regionally as superintendents and districts, and then started meeting with different health people and some city and government officials, and feel good that we're trying to help one another out, make some informed decisions. There's been a lot of work regionally done in support of not just making decisions such as the one today to extend our closure of schools until April 22nd, but also as we're working to help feed the children of the region, get meals in the hands of children and families. Something that all of us can maybe try to take on in isolation, but our children and families are all around the county and all around the city for a lot of different reasons, or they're residing with families for different reasons in different places. The work that's taking place now, the food work has been pretty robust. Moving on to different mental health and social emotional support for families, knowing that there's an absence of particular types of services. So while our schools and our counselors and social workers and different people are going to connect with our children and our families as much as possible, we know that they're dealing with a lot right now. All of us are dealing with a really dynamic, unsettling situation for a lot of different reasons. And there's a lot of pressure on families. And when there's pressure on families, there's pressure on children. And a lot of the work right now regionally is how do we organize and get resources and support out to the families of the region. So I have a number of things that I could talk about, but I wanted to turn it over to my team again, just to speak for no more than 5 minutes apiece about some of the work that they're doing. And so I will start. Sandy, you're the one I just saw come on. Why don't you go ahead and start and just talk about your work from the human resources perspective?
Hello, everyone. So we have done a variety of projects here from the HR lens. Just for your knowledge, all of our HR staff have been equipped with the technology, resources, files, et cetera, in their homes so that we can still support our staff members who are home for the variety of needs. We are still working to finalize, we have finalized compensation and how people will be compensated for the remainder of this time frame now up through April 22nd. We have participated in some webinars and will continue to. There's one tomorrow with regard to the new federal legislation that came out with regarding to emergency pay for staff members, as well as the other provisions for people on FMLA. So we are working to figure out what those new regulations state and ensure the information that we pushed out to our staff members is accurate, knowing that that plan is in place through December 31st. And so just trying to figure out and ensure what we're presenting is accurate. We've set up a couple of hotlines and emails for staff to reach us. And so that a variety of us are getting messages, so it's not housed with one person, so that we can actively respond to staff members who either A, have compromised immune systems, or B, have a family member who maybe is over the age of 60 It has a compromised immune system. And so we are here to support them and make sure they understand what options they have. We have done a lot of partnering, as John talked about, with other districts, just trying to make sure that we are in line with what other districts are doing and are recommending. So that has been an awesome process, participating in MOASPA conversations daily via talent. There's a 5Share website that we utilize. We also have modified and will continue to modify our hiring practices. As you all know, and John will speak to, we have to hire two new principals. So we are in the process of trying to figure out that, because a lot of that has to do with face-to-face hands-on interactions. And so we're trying to figure out a way to be creative with that still and ensure that we're still getting the best candidate for the job. And lastly, because I've been talking a lot, we are establishing some Zooms for the different employee groups. So tomorrow we're meeting with the custodial group at 8 a.m., the custodial supervisors, to make sure that they are understanding and have the information they need to support their crew, so that we can ensure that everybody is aware of what's going on. So our goal would be to have a Zoom established for each employee group in each school, so they can call in and get the support that they need from HR with regarding their specific needs. So that's not all, but that's what we have right now for HR.
Sandy,
Yes.
just a quick question. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit of time to go and get the remote learning and everything working. Can you talk a little bit about, once we've got that in place, what we'll be able to do to go and check on the quality of that learning?
Yes, and Chris, I'm sure, can talk a little bit more about that. But to start, we're doing a kind of a trial run with staff members, just to get the kids aware of the process on Thursday, this upcoming week, Thursday, Friday. So they'll do a little bit of fun learning, maybe one lesson. And then the following week, teachers should be more up to speed and providing a full day's worth of instruction. So we've asked our teachers to be available and instructing for a minimum of 6 hours for the day. And during that time, they should also have a process by which families can reach out to them, whether that be email and or phone. But families should be aware of that communication process. I think by Thursday or Friday of this week, they need to have that communicated out. With regard to the other employee groups, we are establishing either Google Classroom or establishing other types of ways that they can support children in their various roles. One of those pieces has been us trying to figure out the technology needs of our staff. So do all staff have access to a laptop? Do they have Wi-Fi in their homes? And so how are we supporting them so that they can support children? So that's a little bit of the triaging work that we're doing right now. But with regard to the remote learning, it should be up and running and effective for children by next week. And I don't know if Chris, if you want to add more to that.
Yes. So we've been working on a pretty rigorous plan, alternative learning plan that we've rolled out to both teachers and to parents. We started working on this actually the first week in March, I think March 2nd or 3rd, I believe. We're sending out a form survey to all families asking about their accessibility to internet and to computing devices at home. That's something that we've been working on for 3 weeks. Today, we had a second handout of devices for families who had determined or who had indicated that they needed additional support in that area. That was a huge undertaking, and all of this that I'm going to outline, I just want to say thank you to my learning team, the coordinators, Tim Brown, Bill Kay, all of the principals, everybody, because this really was a group effort. So that was really the first part, and we tried to do that as systematically and efficiently as possible because we didn't want to, accidentally be working against each other. So we had a master spreadsheet that listing every child in the district, and we were working off of that to determine whether or not there were devices and or internet supports that are needed. In addition, we've created that alternative learning plan that I talked about that outlined first the professional development that teachers will need. We are utilizing Google Classroom as the learning management platform, and this will be for all teachers K through 12. We felt like it would be important for all families to have a consistent method where teachers are communicating with their students so that there wouldn't be confusion. So that Google Classroom is that learning platform. With that being said, we realized that we needed to provide support. A lot of teachers are utilizing Google Classroom already, but we needed to provide support for those who had not. So Tim Brown has worked to provide professional development modules for teachers who are at different stages with their utilization of Google Classroom. And so he's providing that support and continues to work with the entire staff in that. With that, in addition, we asked teachers to self-identify if they felt like they were a teacher leader around Google Classroom with a survey that we sent out to staff. And so principals have created small cadres of learners within their buildings led by a teacher leader with a ratio of about 5-to-1. So that in addition to the support that Tim and anybody from TLC can help provide, that could be another level of support so that one teacher knows that they can rely on their teacher cadre, and again, in a small group, so that they don't feel as isolated. We're utilizing Zoom conferencing as we're using tonight for our staff to use with their students. Currently, Tim is in the process of syncing with the Zoom company itself with our student database. That's taking some time. As you can probably imagine, there are thousands and thousands of schools and districts across the country who are relying on Zoom. And so he has done his end and he is waiting for them to do theirs. That's going to take probably a couple of more days. So we've also established a technology support process for our teachers in case they need help with their hardware, their software that they're utilizing, as well as their computers. With our parents, we've sent out information on how to log into Google Classroom, how to utilize Zoom from their end, and also ways that they can contact our TLC department for technology support for them. Then we broke down the process at different levels. Walter Ambrose has their own process they're using, elementary, middle school, and high school, with outlines of by the date that they needed to have their Google Classroom set up. As Sandy said, we're shooting for Thursday to be sending out something to families for the first time, and with the expectation or the hope that families will practice on that day getting on Google Classroom and allow us some time to work through any problems or issues that we might have along with that. The elementary principals are doing a slower rollout, as Sandy alluded to, with smaller amounts of work for students at the elementary, because by far it's the elementary level that have not used Google Classroom as often as the secondary. So it's newer to those teachers, students, and families. The outline of the plan has a variety of expectations. One is that we're asking teachers to fill out a lesson plan log, and we're not talking about big lengthy lesson plans, but a quick, very quick short synopsis of what their lesson is for each of the content areas that they teach. This is being turned into their principals, so the principals can be checking on the lessons that are being turned in. In addition, the principals, the special education teachers, and our special education area coordinators are being asked to be added to all of the teachers' Google Classrooms so that that there can be direct understanding of what is occurring in all of those different classrooms as well. The different levels of schools, elementary, for instance, we are indicating that teachers should be planning no more than 15 to 30 minutes per course subject per day, and really focusing largely on ELA and math. That's going to be the primary focus, though there will be lessons coming from the specialty teachers and in science and social studies, but the primary focus will be on ELA and math, at least at the elementary level. And then at middle school and high school, we've asked that the teachers have no more than 30 minutes of work per subject for the students each day. We're trying to be very mindful that some families are sharing devices between students, maybe sharing devices between families who are working from home. And it's really just not best practice to have someone, a child in front of a computer for 6 hours a day. I could go on because this was a lengthy process. We worked very hard. The whole team worked extremely hard to make this happen, but they've put together a vast resources for the teachers to utilize. They've provided resources on how to provide accommodations virtually for our special education students. Our coordinators have created documents giving our elementary teachers in particular, since this is new to them, different ideas of that they can use for instruction for their students. And we've also developed Google Docs and shared drives for our grade levels in order for them to drop in ideas, lessons, and collaborate with each other. So those are just some of the things that we've been working on.
Chris, I have a question, or
Yes.
John, actually, John, anyone who may have the answer to this. Has there been any word, just for parents who might be concerned and students, on SATs and ACTs? Has there been any sort of word from the state or anything, or how those might possibly be implemented?
And if I could add to that, Keita, AP testing as well.
Right, okay.
So I can talk that the information that I've received is that ACT and SAT, it has been canceled through April. We were actually fortunate, just by luck this year, we chose to give our ACT exam in February. So we have already assessed all of our junior students just by luck of the draw. So that's beneficial for us. I have not received direct communication. I just know through some colleagues of mine who I've been told that AP College Board is working on a plan to provide AP exams through a take-home process. So I have, like I said, I have not received direct information on that, but that's the word that I've received from some of my colleague groups.
Thank you.
Do we have any thoughts on how grading is going to work during this time?
So I was on a webinar this afternoon with regional curriculum leaders and talking specifically about that. There's really no good answer. Everybody is trying to be very mindful of doing what's best for our students, trying to make sure that they're not penalized during this time if they might be struggling in an area, but also provide the right supports. We tossed around a variety of ideas. We, as our Webster team, we had talked about utilizing a hold harmless approach where grades could only help you and not hurt you. We haven't fully landed on that. The group that met today regionally had been asked by the superintendent's regional group to come up with recommendations. I think people are trying to do something a little bit more coordinated with a little flexibility built in, because we don't want to be completely out of the ballpark amongst ourselves. Some people were bringing up different ideas, like having if we are going to be out for a longer period of time, coming up with essential understandings that students would only be graded on with that. There's ideas around compacting the curriculum, because we have to look at this not only for the rest of when we're out or the rest of this year, but also look at how that's going to impact our curriculum design moving forward, right? Because we are going to have to be at some point introducing new curriculum, but also realize that there's going to be things that are missed just because you can't replicate face-to-face fully into a virtual. So those are a lot of different things that we're working on. I know that we don't want to do, as a district, we don't want to do anything that's going to hinder or harm our children. But we also are mindful of how can we make sure that our children are still engaged during this process, especially if we're out for a longer period of time.
Thank you.
I have one last question. Is for counseling services for the students. I guess I'm assuming students that need them, those arrangements are being made, but since this is kind of stressful for everyone, how will they get access to counseling services if they need them?
Right. Within our own process, we have asked the teachers to provide their direct line access, their direct school line number for families to contact them. Part of the plan is that they're expected to call into their phone lines daily to get messages that might be left by parents. In addition to that, both our administrators, our counselors, our social workers, and our nurses have their phone lines forwarded to their email. So families can either call their direct number and they'll call in and check their messages, or they can check their email, because that will be forwarded to their email in case they need that emotional support. And so that will be the vast majority of the work our counselors are doing during this time, because yes, we recognize that this is a stressful time, and we're going to have work that needs to occur for our students in order to help support them, as well as our social workers reaching out to help support our families in a variety of needs. Did that answer your question, Kita?
Just trying to unmute myself. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to know that they know that they have a resource that they can go to if necessary. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yes, that information was outlined and shared with parents in the parent alternative learning plan that was sent out.
Pam, why don't you go ahead and jump in?
Okay, so on the operations side, we've been working hard to make sure that we are able to continue operating as close to normal as possible. All the directors in my department, I have to do a shout out to them. They worked tirelessly last week to ensure that we'd be able to do this. The business office has set up to be able to work from home, to be able to respond. We'll have normal working hours, be able to respond to questions. We will process invoices, reimbursements, and most importantly, we're going to be able to pay all of our employees. We're working on processes for our shipments and our mail. And as Chris and Sandy both alluded to, the technology department has been very busy making sure the technology is set up for everyone, not only students, but all the employees that are trying to work from home, the teachers, and including people in central office. The custodial staff has been working hard to make sure our buildings are clean during all of this. And then the child nutrition department, as was mentioned earlier, we were qualified to be able to serve meals at Hudson Elementary School. We were really excited about that. That started today. They served 68 lunches and 60 breakfasts on the first day. They said it went really smooth, so really excited to see that program off and running.
So we throughout the organization, and I will say in schools too, obviously a key component of doing just organization normally, as well as in this particular, with this change in this educational, this work paradigm, is systems of communication and structure for. And so principals are setting up regular ways to communicate with their staffs on a ongoing regular basis. That's the same with our team. Our Sandy and Pam and Chris and I are going to have a time that's set aside every day for us to get together online to communicate with one another, a space to share different questions, wonderings, things we have to attend to. Our CO admin team will meet weekly online. Our DLT team will also meet weekly online just to touch base and see how things are going and kind of work through different issues and problems that we have. And we'll also, as an entire central office, both support staff and administrators meet on a weekly basis. So it's certainly not great circumstances, but I'm really proud of the team. I think was echoed by Chris, all the administrative staff and all the time that they dedicated over spring break. It was easily 10 to 15-hour days, 7 days over spring break. It's a break that a lot of people need. And so I just can't be more thankful for them. And now our teachers have the huge task, our support staff, and we still have the big task. But teaching is a really complex technical thing, and it's relationship driven. And there are things don't come across screens as well as the face-to-face. And I know that our staff is up for the challenge. They're ready for the challenge, and that they'll rise to meet our kids' needs. So I also, from a communication standpoint, are gonna put out things every Friday to our community. If it's something that's emerging, such as the decision made today, I'll push it out to the community overall. But otherwise, every Friday, I'm going to send something out to the community that has different updates and resources that they can access from a district level standpoint. So, any questions? That was a lot of information. Anything?
John, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody on your team and you for just being flexible. And I had heard a community member in a staff meeting at work, actually, that we're doing on Zoom, quote your letter and talking about the grace that we have to give each other in this time period. And again, I just really appreciate all the hard work of our teachers, our staff, our parents, our kids. They're finding some creative solutions, and it's inspiring, but it's unfortunate as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. And it is going to be, that grace piece is huge, as my wife and I have 1-year-old, 4-year-old, and 12-year-old, and I'm working at a table, and she's like, just imagine if I had to teach 25 or 110 kids, like, how is this all going to look? I'm like, I don't know, but I know you'd try as hard as you can. And so it's, that grace is going to be important, and we'll all do our best. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll echo that thanks. These obviously are unprecedented times. And I know I've been in frequent communication with John and David and the other board members to a lesser extent, just about how things are constantly changing and the need to respond. You know, information we put out at 10 o'clock a.m. may be different by 11 a.m., 12. So it's a challenging situation. And I know John and his team have put in a ridiculous number of hours and aren't getting a whole lot of sleep. So you certainly have my grace, and I hope that I have yours. One quick point, we may have buried the lead a little bit on that last update. I should point out, although the email went out to all families, that and particularly in regard to some of the comments made in the public comment section, that school has been closed through April 22nd, consistent with the county-wide order to stay at home. So probably everyone knows that, but I just thought it was worth saying.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and go ahead, Christine.
So it's Christine again, and I had a quick question. The April 13th Board of Education meeting then, will that be held via Skype, via Zoom as well?
We haven't talked about it. I mean, we'll make an assessment at that time. It's nice to know that we have the ability to do that. We really had, you know, and John will tell you, up until the last minute, we had planned to do this one live. And I should probably make this clear to the public or whoever's watching as well, that all of the Board of Education members are participating via video conferencing, which is important for sunshine law purposes. You can't necessarily see us. You can see us when we talk, but we are all on Zoom, which is a video conferencing platform. And so this has been our first attempt to use this tool with this many people on the line. And so far so good. I probably just jinxed it, but it is good to know that we can do this again for our April meeting if we need to. Obviously, you know, I think all of us understand the importance of transparency and communicating with the public, and we're doing the best we can. Hope the public will show some grace as well if in fact it is necessary to do the next meeting virtually. Any other questions or comments about the pandemic response before we move on to the next item? If not, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Simpson, but I also want to point out that our consultant, maybe John, you were going to introduce him, but Scott Leopold is on, our consultant is on the video conference as well and is available for questions just in case you all can't see that he is with us. He is available. All right, John.
Before we move on to the boundary lines, wanted to get your permission, the board, to vote on a resolution. Amy is the one who was aware that MSBA had put out a resolution given the circumstances that we're in. This particular resolution that is in your board packet would allow me to make a decision that goes against board policy, but not state or federal law, in the best interests of our kids and our organization. The decision would have to be run through Amy or David in order for it to be made. But like Amy said, things are happening so rapidly, and I don't know what this might be at the moment, but the resolution would give us the ability to do that, again, for the betterment of our kids and our families and our community. Amy, do you want to add anything to that?
I assume everybody, again, I apologize for missing that item. Thank you. This is several of the school districts that I work with professionally have adopted similar resolutions. This is put out by Missouri School Boards Association, so it's available for use by all of their member districts. And I think it's simply a recognition of the fact that we need to make sure that our administrators have the ability to do what they need to do under the circumstances when they otherwise might call a board meeting. We may not have the luxury of doing that right now. It does make clear that there won't be any decisions that are made without, if it's a legal issue, running it through our district's attorney. So it doesn't give the administration the authority to do anything that they aren't already legally empowered to do, but it does let them sort of bypass us. Well, I mean, you guys know John's exceptional about communicating, so I'm confident we're always going to know what's going on. But we thought it would be good to put this in writing to give them some additional flexibility.
I think that makes sense. Do we need a motion?
We do. And I think it's in our materials, and then there is a motion for someone, it's written out if somebody wants to make it.
I don't see it written out, but I make a motion, we adopt the resolution in response to health emergency.
Second.
All right, Joe moved and Keita seconded. All those in favor, aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, we'll record that as a 6-0 vote of approval. Thanks for catching that, John.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to the next topic, the elementary redistricting. As Amy had said, Scott Leopold from Cooperative Strategies is on the call with us this evening. I am going to go ahead. I've prepared a presentation that I will post to our board materials afterwards for the public to see. It's going to kind of guide the presentation. At any point along the way, ask a question of Scott or I. Certainly Keita was the board rep on the process. You could ask her as well. So I'm going to share my screen, see how it goes. Did that work?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, I see it.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Great. So I'm going to go through some information. I'm not going to spend a ton on some of the slides or some of the data because it's data and information that you've had and has been presented to you before, but I will dedicate a little bit of time to it. And so again, just ask a question or tell me to slow down. First of all, going to start with the why and really how do we get to this point? And I think we all know that the reason we got to this point was due to the overcrowding in our elementary schools. We've had for a number of years crowding in our elementary schools, which has really pushed the capacity of our buildings, extended the capacity of our buildings to the point that right now we have 5 modular buildings, classrooms, units that house approximately 10 classes of children in the district, 3 at Edgar Road, 1 at Avery, and 1 at Bristol. These pictures highlight how learning spills into the hallways for different groups, teachers working with children one-on-one, staff that no longer have workrooms or places to eat, and then just overcrowded hallways and classrooms all around. This need has been for some time. This past April, our community overwhelmingly supported Proposition E, passed by 78%. And the solution was to convert Steger Givens, that campus, into an neighborhood elementary school. And so that's what we're doing moving forward. From a process standpoint, last summer we initiated an RFQ, then RFP to seek out somebody to help facilitate this particular work. Cooperative Strategies was the company that was hired, Scott's team. While all of the companies that submitted bids had the technical expertise, the GIST technologies to place children and families and where are they and draw lines. The thing that we've learned from working with Cooperative Strategies and Scott is they really are incredible listeners. They really generate great discussions and they get the people piece. And a lot of the people that we interviewed or met with just that doesn't seem to be present. They get the piece. Cooperative Strategies also had the benefit of helping us to arrive at the decision to make the neighborhood school at Steger and Givens. So they had a little bit of the historical component as well. I will say I continue to be impressed, and the committee members are. Scott's knowledge of the school system and where roads are and where schools are is pretty remarkable. Especially some of the roads you wouldn't think he would know where they are. He does know where they are. And he has driven around our roads just to get full knowledge of the community and some of the dynamics. Early on, we made the determination to have a advisory group that would help guide the process. Public input, just like with our decision for Prop E, is critical to our decision making. We've been clear through this process, like we were at the beginning, that we're going to seek people's input and feedback. We're going to listen to them. You're going to see that we're listening. Ultimately, the decision is going to be ours to make. Mine to recommend ultimately to the Board of Education for approval. The advisory, we had a representative from each of our buildings attend. We had participate. We had our board rep, that was Keita, And then we had three local people who would not have elementary school children in the future also participate. We really placed a priority on helping try to find people that had a big picture mentality, that weren't going to get focused and locked in on how is this going to impact me or how is this going to impact my street. It was important for us to listen to all the individuals and how it was going to impact them in their street. But ultimately, we're making a decision for the children of this entire community, those that are in school, those that'll be in school in the near future, and those that are going to be in school down the road. And so it was critically important for us to think of the now, but also make decisions based on the future. The process would be for them to make the recommendation to me, and I would ultimately endorse it, not endorse it, modify it, and then bring it to the Board of Education. The goals for the process, again, we went to the voters because space was the issue. We had an issue with elementary school space, and so it was a capacity issue overall. The solution was to, again, create the neighborhood school at Givens and Steger. That would allow that capacity space in all of the schools to free. The guidelines that we use, certainly the balance of the utilization. If space was our number one goal, we had to be mindful of drawing boundary lines that help to ease the space crunch in some of our schools and try and create as similar capacities, meaning utilization, better term, but try to be more respectful of how the buildings are utilized, numbers of kids in the schools. Also to be factored in was to attempt to balance socioeconomics as well as minimize travel distances by students. So by balancing utilization, again, this is data and information that you've seen before. This shows right here our capacities and utilizations as if we did not have modular units. The modular units were not intended to be a permanent fixture in our schools. There's a lot of limitations with the modular units, including their inability to get water, the fact that children are kind of isolated outside of the building, outside of the school community. We have a lot of children who receive a lot of different special support services. Those kids have to go in and out on rainy days, on snowy days. It's less fun than on 70-degree days. So we've looked at all the numbers with and without the modulars, but for what we're looking at here, this is the capacity without modulars. The attend count is the second column. That's how many children are currently attending that school. And you could see based on what our class size averages are, the utilization of those schools. Avery, Bristol, Clark, and Edgar Road are very full when it comes to utilization. Next to that is the live-in count. That is if currently we have a policy that allows families to apply for an intra-district transfer. Space exists in that school. We've allowed that to occur thus far. We have a practice that allows staff to bring their children to school. They're not allowed to go anywhere. They're placed in a school that has space. And so that live-in count is if everybody went to their elementary school, all of the resident children. This takes out the non-resident staff. This takes out the children who participate in the voluntary transfer program coming to us from St. Louis City. If our resident student population went to their school, that's how many kids would be in that particular school. So at Avery, there would be 500 children with a utilization of 111. Again, this is data and information that you've seen before. Here's the latest enrollment projections. We use Dr. Charles Coffron. A number of districts do to project enrollment. His enrollment is based on birth data, and then how many what number of children are born within a district, within a particular boundary area, and then how many children show up in your schools as a district and in those particular areas 5 years down the road. Obviously, he's not tracking individual children, but his estimates has consistently shown that approximately 76 to 78% of the number of children that are born within the district boundaries attend district schools 5 years later. And so his numbers, once again, he projects kindergarten enrollment data, but then he also projects data K through 12. based on the number of children that move in or move out in our district throughout the years. One of the things that's come up along this way, and something that we had to debate and discuss a lot and look at numbers, was projected enrollment. If we allowed our current families, our current intra-district transfer policy to continue. And Scott ended up crunching some numbers, and Scott, you could jump in if you think I'm off. But really what he did is he looked at the current kindergarten class and did some data analysis of how many, how many of them had siblings in 1st through 5th grade. And then from that, he projected, well, Scott, why don't you jump in? I see you shaking your head.
So when we analyzed the kindergarten enrollment, I went in and tried to see how many of those kindergartners had siblings in the grades above them. So it doesn't matter how many siblings they have, just that they have siblings. And what we found was that roughly 50% of any given kindergarten class, those kids have older siblings in the system. And so this kind of models the changes with those younger siblings staying at their older siblings' school, and then it falls off basically 1/6 per year because you have less older siblings because you've kind of drawn the line at that 21-22 school year. And so it kind of shows a very gentle phase in, because we're still allowing siblings, but just knowing that we'll have less siblings as we go forward, because we'll have less older siblings because we're rolling those grades out into middle school.
So the attempt to balance SES, it's important to note that, as we think about diversity, most of our families want diverse schools in every which way. And for purposes of redrawing boundary lines, we decided to use SES. Scott would say that most of the districts around the country use this. We are not allowed to use race as a factor in drawing boundary lines. Federal law prohibits that.
John, excuse me, this is Amy. Real quick, can you just explain for those who might not know what SES is?
Thank you. So SES is socioeconomic status. So let me just clarify. Thank you. So for our process, we were looking at socioeconomic status. The one metric that we use, because this question did come up, is free children that participate, families that participate in our free and reduced lunch meal program. So that was the data that we used for socioeconomic status. That's not a one-to-one. It doesn't. I got another slide here that'll show you, because there are some misperceptions related to that. But that was our one factor that we used. Here you could see, based on the concentration, the darkening of the colors, or the higher concentrations of children who receive free and reduced meals at this point live. Kind of speaking to some of a lot of the misinformation that's out there. A lot of people, when they make comments, would make a lot of assumptions related to the free and reduced lunch meal program. Here's some data that's from the particular authority on this. You can see that while there are some families that participate in this program that fall below the poverty line, you can be a family that's 185% above that line and still qualify for this particular service. And so there's a quite a big range there. We don't have within our district very many families that qualify for this. 14%. I mean, it's a sizable number. But I know different people would reach out to me and talk about, well, how you're going to have a high poverty school. Here's some research related to that. It's just not the case. We've had a number of schools, including recent history, that have had higher free and reduced lunch population, or nearly as close to what the given school is projected to be. The attempt to balance distance to school. Here's the data that Scott had shared. If everybody went to their closest school, and distance was done by roads, so it wasn't like you can cut behind the yard and get to the school. It was if you had to take a road to get to the school this is what the boundary line map would look like. And you could see that the utilization would be way off. You'd have Avery at 120%, and then you'd have Hudson and Givens in the 60s. But just to give people perspective that everyone just can't go to their closest neighborhood school. It's just not possible. And us relieve space in schools. The work of the committee, again, this was done before. I won't spend a lot of time. They met a lot.
It's Amy again. I'm sorry. I'm gonna jump in one more time because it relates to the closest school issue. We've heard a lot from families in a particular area of the district talking about how the redrawn boundary lines will require them to go to their third closest school. And that's something that has come up several times. Are multiple parts of the district, in other words, what I'm trying to say is, are the folks who live in the, let's say your neighborhood, John, are they the only ones who are having to go to their third closest school, or is that affecting other parts of the district as well?
Scott, do you want to talk about that? I think I could answer it, but do you want to say that?
We looked at the Shrewsbury area, and it is technically not going to the third closest school, but the distance is the same from Shrewsbury to Bristol as the Webster Hills area is to Givens. But it's not the third closest school, it's the second. But their distance to Bristol is actually closer than to Edgar Road, which is where they're currently zoned.
All right, thanks. And then I guess the point of that is, again, as John said, to maintain the socioeconomic balance.
The elementary, yeah, and it's everything's multifaceted.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's entirely for socioeconomics. It's also for the balance of utilization.
Yeah. So the redistricting group met multiple times. They met without any district administrators. I was there the first time around to kind of orient and welcome the group. And they developed projections along the way with those factors in mind, as well as others, such as natural barriers and dangerous roads. Throughout, there was an opportunity for the public to be involved through focus groups. We had everybody who in the community that signed up for focus groups had an opportunity to participate. We had over 1,600 people that completed an online survey. We had 6 different open house events at different times of day. We communicated all throughout the way with families through blasts, email blasts, websites. We also used direct mail to every household within our community. We had social media. We worked with private preschools that, not district preschools, in order to push out opportunities and information as well. So this kind of outlines that process. Here is the recommended boundary lines. It has not changed from the last meeting that we presented. And here is the data around those. Scott, do you want to speak to, you're probably the best equipped just to speak to the data and how you arrived at this again?
Sure. So this is, again, this is the same recommendation that we shared on the 24th. Just to kind of go through the tables, you can see the current boundary utilization. That's the table that shows the numbers that are in the pink. Then we show our scenario boundaries with our utilizations in the green, very well balanced. Our range for socioeconomics is between 4% and 30%. The composition of the schools, which is on the bottom right, this shows what the percentage of the proposed boundaries are based on the current boundaries. So everybody who would be in the future Avery boundary is currently in Avery. The new Bristol boundary would be composed of 66% students that are already at Bristol, 8% of students that are at Avery currently, 9% at Clark, and 17% at Edgar Road. Just to kind of give you an idea of what those compositions look like, looking at Givens would be 20% Avery, 60% Bristol, 4% Clark, 11% Edgar Road, and 5% Hudson. So next.
That's it for this one.
Okay.
So I noticed a little error there, but some of the different things that have come up as a result of some of the feedback or things that we've heard are, one, questioning the commitment to equity, speaking of our resolution. And what I guess, first of all, that our district has been committed to equity and has re-upped that commitment a lot in recent history in the past few years and even this year. And our goal is to, in order to help children see learning, see themselves reflected in the learning, and see others reflected in the learning, it's going to take a concentrated, multifaceted approach to doing that through curriculum, through resources, through experience. Just school demographics alone is not something necessarily, especially in Webster Groves, that in comparison to a lot of regional schools is not that diverse. But one of the things that we talked about, and we're doing a lot with those particular areas, it was something that the advisory committee also talked about, is how can we develop curricular connections, common experiences for children across the district prior to 6th grade, when they all come together to start, again, building relationships, also certainly being in spaces with people that are like you and not like you is really important. So the district's commitment to equity is certainly showing up in a lot of different ways. I will also say that with this, again, just kind of reminding folks, here's the placement of our elementary schools, the 5 elementary schools, neighborhood schools existing. Here's where Givens and Steger is currently. As we try to get our schools to be neighborhood schools, if we could pick up our schools and move them, we could, there's a lot of different things that we could do, but we can't. We're kind of fixed where they are. But again, a lot of people don't know still that we have these non-contiguous zones. That's the Clark zone up there in that top left-hand corner. And those children since 1978 have been required, unless they applied for intra-district transfer, to ride a bus across the city to get to Clark Elementary School to go to school. The Bristol children have gone to Bristol. They haven't had the opportunity to ride a bus, but they've gone to Bristol there. And then Edgar Road, that particular area, those children have gone across a bus to Edgar Road from this time since 1978. And so I do feel that, again, that decision was made as a result of Brown versus Board of Education. When Brown versus Board of Education happened, there wasn't in the ruling an expectation for when districts must comply with the particular ruling, which is why you saw into the 2000s probably districts in some areas that still were not adhering to the law of the land. But what our district had done in that time had looked to integrate schools, and the decision that they had made was to take the children from that particular area. And at that point, they were using race and to move those children to, at the time, predominantly white schools. And again, that's still, we have over 100 children today that are still getting on buses or being driven to those particular schools. And so I do see, while our Proposition E wasn't all about this particular structural inequity, as I see it, certainly a byproduct of it and this decision, and something that we talked about prior to approving it, is that this would create an opportunity for more people to have a neighborhood school. So we realize that for some people, the school might be a little bit further away, but we do see this as a pretty big undo of an inequitable structure and system that's been in place for some time. And we've also heard from a number of people, although none in the comments tonight, their feelings regarding it and their support for this particular decision. Map data, one of the things that has also come up is, again, just the feeling of, and some of it comes from I think misinformation or just not knowing. Again, we don't have a high concentration of students that are on free and reduced lunch. Yes, the disparity at the school is big compared to when you compare 30 to 4. But as I've said, we've had a number of schools in recent history. Hudson Elementary School 4 years ago had a free and reduced lunch population of 4%. And I would challenge any of you, any of us, any of the community to find people within that school community that their school was any less than in any kind of way than any kind of other school. And again, it's not the only school that's been up or near that high in at least my 15 years that have been here.
John, can you
yeah,
just, what was that percentage for Hudson? I thought I heard you say 4.
32 for Hudson.
Okay, sorry, I misheard. Thank you.
That's okay. But one of the questions that has come up is regarding the data, and while in my profession, in my opinion, in my expertise, that judging the quality of school on map data can be really, really misleading. It's important. It's important data. It's important that our kids do well on it. It's a data point that we look at and we take seriously, but I don't think it's completely representative of school. But nonetheless, I had Dr. Dembo do an analysis. And what she did is she looked at different cohorts of kids, starting with our current graduating class this year and the 2 preceding years, and looking at how they did as 5th graders and how they did as high schoolers on map tests. And then what we did is we looked at the schools, how did the schools that receive title funding do compared to the schools that did not receive title funding. We do have schools that are receive targeted title funds based on the free and reduced lunch population being higher than the other schools. Again, sometimes it's drastically higher, sometimes it's not as high, but nonetheless, it's higher than the other schools. The money for those schools, federal money, federal dollars go to those schools, and I'll kind of explain how that looks. But what this data shows right here is not a whole lot of difference between, and we looked at kids who were here in 5th grade and then took again the test in high school. And what this data shows, you can see the groups of students below, the total ELA and total math looks at that particular, those schools, and the average level of proficiency in advanced. And the light blue are the schools that are non-title schools, and the dark blue are the schools that are title. And you could see the total and for ELA and both math are pretty similar. And then we looked at the students who at the time received free and reduced lunch, and how did they do when you looked at both those types of schools. And in this instance, with this particular group, the schools that received, that were title schools, those children did better. And then you will see that the children that did not receive title funds did not receive free and reduced lunch, rather, in those particular schools, how they did. And in a sense, you could see it was pretty even. And in the math, the kids who were not in the title schools or who were in the title schools did better than not. And so with all of the data, and I'll kind of move slowly through it, you'll notice there wasn't a whole lot of difference for how our children did. This is an example of how those kids did, the data I just showed you. What did their data look like in high school? And again, I won't read it all to you, but you could see with this particular cohort of kids, and you'll see differences with different sets, that the children who attended our title schools outperformed, in this case, in every particular category as high school students. This data, again, pretty similar. The non-title school data is a little bit better in most instances than the title schools overall. But again, nothing drastic, nothing what I think some people are perceiving when they think about what the data and the numbers might look like in the school. Here's how those kids did as high schoolers. And here's this year's group of kids. So in the non-title schools, they did a little bit better. On the ELA total, the math total, the title schools did a smidge better. And again, you could see pretty close all the way throughout. And here's how it looked in high school. Again, nothing too drastic. And so again, based on the data and the information from our schools, based on our performance, the quality of our teachers, we continue to have concerns. Like when you look at this data and you look at the gaps between how our children receiving free and reduced lunch do compared to our children not, that's where our concerns lie. Because we as a school system still have to do a much better job of meeting the needs of different groups of children. But we don't have a worry with respect of how our diverse schools, the diversity of our schools and how our children are going to perform based on percentages of kids in our schools. School funding is something that have come up. Again, we looked at, so just some of the points that I made here is that our schools are provided with dollar amounts based on the number of kids that are in the school. We are always cognizant of schools that need additional support for one reason or another. We make those administrative decisions all the time. Just recently, we made the decision to hire a staff member for a school based on a need. And we do that, but we don't also make assumptions that a school with higher free and reduced lunch population is going to need a lot more support necessarily, counseling and social work, than a school that does not have as high. Again, we have some data to support. We have data to support that. So Title I money, our schools do receive Title I money. It continues to be reduced. But and that money does follow particular children. So the funds basically, again, they go to the school based on the number of children who receive free and reduced lunch funding. But again, the assumption is not that those children themselves are the ones that are actually going to need the support. So the supports are put in place for the children who need the support, regardless of whether they receive free and reduced lunch funding or not. Chris pulled this data that showed this past year, we had $225,000 in title funding. And so in this particular scenario, if Givens was a school at 30%, they would receive 75 to 80% of that money to go towards supporting the needs of children, to be determined how they want it. That could be for academic support. In some of our schools, they use that for extra teachers or math tutors. You can use it for social emotional support. You can use it for family involvement programs. Again, it would be based on what are the needs of that particular school. We are planned to dedicate, there are already resources set aside to support the launch of the school, both the physical structure of the school, as well as just bringing that school community together to help think about that school and what their hopes for the school are. PTO money, there's been a lot of energy generated about the PTOs. And again, PTOs are private, they're outside of our control, but I've spoken with different PTO leaders and more than happy to coordinate bringing PTOs together to talk about shared funding. There are discrepancies at schools that are pretty big within our entire budget of as a school system. They're not as big, but they are big in terms of some of the PTO support. And again, I think we don't want to necessarily, this can lead to some assumptions too, but I will say that from a PTO standpoint, that there are discussions being had among parents about possibly sharing of funds. And we as a district, if there was anything noticeable that we felt that there was a need, that again, coming back up to the support of schools, that we would be able to fill in any kind of gaps. So the implementation phases, considering all the data and the information, this is what I had shared before. And again, I know that different people feel differently based on how it affects them. We've heard from a lot of people who think it's a pretty generous phase-in. Scott, who's the professional who goes around the country, would say that most school districts don't allow for the generous phase-in that we're allowing. We're going to see and feel the space relief slower because of it. But when we surveyed and listened to our community, when we were going through the whole idea of what to do, making that decision last year, it was clear that if they really felt strongly that if kids were in the school, that they should be allowed to continue. That was an ongoing theme. So with 2021 enrollment, if you're as this says here, any student enrolled in a district elementary during the 2021 school year, they'll be permitted to remain at that school through 5th grade if that family so chooses. So if they enter as a kindergartner all the way through 5th grader and they want to stay at that elementary, they can. This includes families that, if board approves tonight, the new zones would be zoned for a different school. This includes students who are currently attending schools on inter-district transfers, and this includes the students of non-resident staff. Also, during the 2021 school year, we would continue next year to allow intra-district transfers to still be processed much the same way that they're done now, as well, or the exact same way, I should say, as well as district staff bringing their kids to school. That would be processed the same way, meaning if space exists in a school, then we would allow them to come if that space exists. We've also had the practice of allowing, if the children were in the school already, if the family was already in the school, allowing that younger sibling to come. We would allow both of those to continue. Our plan is still to have a lottery for the 2021 kindergarten class at Givens Elementary, which has continued to be pushed back based on different things as it relates to board meetings and finalization. And now we're going to have to be a little bit more creative with our current state. And I say that with the 21 there. The recommendation also that we have is that with that particular school in Givens, if you, right now Givens is a single grade school. We have found the space to be allowed if you have a kindergartner in 2021 and you fall in the Givens zone for 21-22, that we would allow those children to start at Givens in 2021. For 21-22, administration, I am still recommending that children that are brand new to the district, and by the district, I mean K through 12 education at the start of 21-22, including kids that have older siblings in the school, that they be required to attend the school to which they're zoned in accordance with the revised boundary lines. I also recommend that any district family, or we will allow that if for any reason, 21-22 or after, if you stayed in a particular school and you want to move to your newly zoned school, you have permission to do that. The time frame for declarations, we will have to in August of next year ask families to declare which school they're going to go to if their residence has been rezoned. And the purpose of that is we have to know how many children are going to be in each of our schools. Again, coming back to that funding piece so that we know how to fund those particular schools. This will also allow time for our staff to begin transitioning because we have to, again, move resources, including teachers, including support staff, including administrators to schools where the children are. We will not be likely hiring any outside staff unless we have retirements. These will be our same fantastic staff that we have in all of our other schools. Again, Dr. Henry Givens Jr. Elementary School, I'm quite excited about it. Obviously, I have a personal investment in it with a child who will go there, but it's an incredible campus space, once a middle school, that we will work with the school community to help envision and launch in terms of an elementary school. They will, like all district schools, have an outstanding faculty and staff, top-notch professional development, same curriculum, same programs, everything, resources aligned with our district programs as well as with the school's needs. We will look to develop a launch team soon, soon after the new principal is hired. Families that are going to be rezoned for that school who are interested in participating in that process will have an opportunity to participate in that. The families in the schools will work with district staff, including myself, to help again with that re-envisioning and that launch of the school. And like I said earlier, we're committed to the resources behind it. So that's a lot of information, but I'm open to any questions, and Scott's here, and I'm sure Keita would be willing to answer anything too.
So I want to make sure that the board members all have an opportunity to ask questions and or weigh in. So Alex, I see you are on now. I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay. So I don't really have any questions, but I do have a statement that I wrote that I wanted to read kind of prior to voting on this. So I really wanted to take a moment to address comments that I've heard and read throughout the process. First and foremost, I do wish there was a one-size-fits-all plan that solved for diversity, neighborhood schools, and school utilization. There just isn't. The topic itself is one that understandably evokes many emotions, given that it deals with things that we treasure most, our children and their success. Webster Groves is a microcosm of St. Louis, and that we have pockets within Webster Groves of households with lower socioeconomic status and higher socioeconomic status. Currently, the district is busing students from North Webster, several schools within the district, and the benefit, if you will, being that we've got a similar level of diversity today across the district than at any one school. The problem with this is that the students being bused and their families have a hardship when it comes to school activities, especially after school, and more importantly, creating a culture in their own neighborhood where friends can go to school with friends. That's not necessarily possible by busing kids from the same neighborhood to different schools. Moreover, it pulls the wool over our eyes as a community, dismissing the fact that we really aren't a community within Webster Groves that's laid out as diversely as our elementary schools would lead us to believe that we are. Our schools are overcrowded. That's why we as a community came together to pass Proposition E to ensure that we could handle the number of students that we have and will continue to have in our district for the foreseeable future. We also felt as a community that the idea of neighborhood schools was important, allowing for neighborhoods to come together and really get behind the local elementary school and greater district. I think I can speak for my board colleagues when I say I do empathize with the families that have siblings and they are going to have to make tough decisions on which school they attend. But we passed, again, Proposition E to ensure that every student that is in the district would receive a quality education in a school that was not bursting at the seams. It's our obligation as public servants to exhaust all efforts to ensure that we're being fiscally responsible while also having the students' and families' best interests in mind. The plan that you see before you today that John just explained has been thoroughly vetted. And I would say that the planning for this has actually started prior to the passage of Proposition E. I mean, we were talking neighborhood schools to the community before then. Unfortunately, affordable housing, especially for families with less or no disposable income, is not available throughout the district. This is a problem that if we as a community feel passionately about, needs to be taken up with the varying city councils that make up the Webster Grove School District. Affordable housing happens to be available in pockets within our district, as I've mentioned. The school district cannot solve this problem. What the district can do is ensure that every child has every resource he or she needs to succeed. Some students will have more resources than others, and like today, some buildings will need more resources than others to ensure that when our children come together in 6th grade from across the district, they have the same foundation of knowledge. That's on the district. That's on us. This administration is the right administration to deal with this and will ensure that all children and families in the district have the resources that they need. However, busing groups of students, whether they're from low or high socioeconomic backgrounds, is inequitable for those students and their families and contradicts the notion of neighborhood schools. Finally, regarding other resources really outside of the school district's funding, I know John mentioned this as well, but coming together and trying to create a more equitable dispersing of PTO funds and other funding. I love that idea. I think that the fact that it's coming up now is great, but I think we also need to realize that we're currently living in a Webster Groves that is not equitable from a PTO or funding standpoint. There's some schools, elementary schools in our districts that receive much more PTO funding and funding than other schools today. So the fact that we're talking about it now because of the addition of one elementary school is great, but we really need to think about the greater district if this is something that we want to pursue as opposed to just helping one school. I think so really I'll just end with saying the process of redrawing these boundary lines has brought inequity in our community to the surface. Specifically, I think regarding affordable housing, and now it's up to us to decide, whether when this passes, whether we want to go back to just how things were prior and kind of focus on where we live, or if we want to decide that we really want to take equity on as a community within Webster Groves, and be a city that the rest of the city of St. Louis or even the rest of the country can look at as a model of how to do things right. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Other comments or questions? David? Oh, sorry, Gita.
No, let Gita go next.
I'm trying to remain positive, but I have to admit that as a recipient of free and reduced lunch myself as a child, and with the coded language of some of the comments that have been made, it's very, very offensive to me. I'll just say to me. Some of the assumptions that are being made about kids who are on free and reduced lunch. There are kids in from higher income homes that struggle academically, just like there are kids from lower income homes that actually excel academically. Test scores, to me, I wish that we could throw them out. They do not tell the whole story of kids. Again, I can use my own example that I use all the time. My oldest daughter did not test well because she has test anxiety. However, she remained on the honor roll all 4 years in high school. She graduated from Webster magna cum laude, and she remained on the honor roll throughout her years at Mizzou. I know other kids who also qualify for free and reduced lunch who graduated with a 4.0 plus. I didn't even know you could do that, but they did because of AB classes and other opportunities. I think that those assumptions are very old and very tired, and they are actually based on stereotypes that were literally created to perpetuate inequitable systems. So in this 2020 year, it's time to start thinking anew about this stuff. All children think differently. All children are raised differently. Just because you may not see particular parents all the time does not mean that those parents don't care about their children. It's just a difference, and differences are actually okay. What I would love to see with Givens is the creativity and the sharing that's coming about with this health crisis that I'm seeing would be awesome if we could carry that over into building Givens. The teacher creativity, parent creativity, staff administration, kids ideas. I mean, the things that people are coming up with to do to get through this crisis are the same things that we can do to make Givens a great school. We have an opportunity for a brand new school, and people are already writing it off before we even get there. So I would just like to see that carried over. That's really all I'll say about that. Thank you to everyone for your thoughts and ideas, and thank you for your support.
Thanks, Geeta, and thank you also for being a part of this process from the beginning and putting your heart and soul into it. I appreciate it. David or Joe, I think you were both up.
Joe?
David, go ahead. My laptop's about to die.
Oh, okay. All right. So first, I just wanted to thank John for the presentation he put together. I think that we've had a number of questions that have been raised throughout this process. And I think that whilst people may not like all the answers that John has given and may not necessarily, everybody may not agree with them, I do think he did a very good job of addressing those. And I think that he was able to do a good job because of all the hard work that the committee has done, because of all the hard work that Scott has done. I think we all recognize that in an ideal world, as John has pointed out, we'd have everything would be everything would be above average everywhere, except for SES, which would be at 0 everywhere, and it's not possible. I think that for me, at least, neighborhood schools trumps everything else. I think that having children move from one area or another just so that we can get SES numbers around, and any of the solutions that I've heard all revolve around moving children for whom having a neighborhood school is going to be the greatest, or it's going to be a great assistance to them in their success. So the one thing I would say, I do feel in terms of the siblings, I do feel for the parents of the siblings who've got siblings that are coming along, and I do understand the idea of splitting the schools there. And whilst certainly we've got to lay down solid rules right now, and we should do that. If at a later stage it turns out that it's possible to do something different for siblings, I know that Dr. Simpson will come at that. Nobody should read into that we're going to do it. I don't believe we can, but if things change in some way or another, I'd like to think that we'd at least look at it. But basically, I'd like what's been a very difficult job. I believe the committee's done a very good job, has come up with something that that addresses the priorities that we put out, which is, primarily it's getting a neighborhood school. It's putting groups of children. It's not busing children from one place or another. And for me, this is the solution that's best going to accomplish that. So just thank you very much.
I will just echo some of the same thoughts that everyone else has said. And I think that Alex is exactly right when he said this has brought inequities to the surface that have always been there, but suddenly we're forced to look at. As someone who had kids that started at Hudson, which was a high free reduced lunch percentage school, and moved to Bristol because we moved to a different neighborhood, I could never have noticed that one was any different than the other. The Bristol PTO didn't raised way more money than the Hudson PTO, but that didn't affect my kids' education or our experience at all. In fact, it was really a hard decision to leave Hudson because we were so happy there. And I just think our schools are overcrowded, which that in itself is creating inequities, right? If you're in a classroom that doesn't have water and you're far away, that's not an ideal learning situation. It's not safe in a lot of ways. So I think that in itself is inequity. And I think that the North Webster community has put up with being shipped all over the district for many, many years, and it's time to make that right. And give them a neighborhood school. And I have no doubt that this district will do everything they can do to make sure that that school is just as amazing as every other school in the district. And I'm sure if you talk to people at Givens now, they would tell you it's a great school. And the other factor I think now is that I think COVID-19 is actually going to be a big leveling factor, right? So some people that may not be free and reduced lunch this year may be next year. So who knows what those percentages will actually look like. That's not something anybody can ever count on. So anyway, I think it's a good decision. I think a lot of work went into it, a lot of thought. we're never going to make everybody happy, but I think we're doing what's best for kids, which ultimately is our job.
Thanks, Joe. And I wanted to thank you, Keita, not only for serving on the committee, but for sharing your truth as well. And, you know, there's certainly a number of us who are listening and have been disgusted at the comments that we read. And I was happy this evening that I heard John speak to a couple of comments specifically about what would happen in the other schools once this happened. In terms of a lack of diversity. It should not be on the backs of kids. But how is curriculum, I think that's going to be an important thing going forward. How is curriculum making sure that kids have similar experiences? And so they build relationships, and so they build understanding of others. And, you know, I think that we've got a strong set of teachers and a great curriculum being written for history that's going to help that. I wanted to say too, I heard details about how Givens would be funded into the future. And I wanted to give thanks to the community members who not only engaged in the process on the committee, which certainly I know that they spent a lot of hard work on that with you, Scott, but also the community members who have engaged throughout this process in listening and in sharing ideas and sharing their concerns and sharing their anxieties. This is never an easy time to redistrict, certainly, but we live in a district where we do focus on what is best for kids, and we live in a small district that is not farther than 3 or 4 miles wide. So as we do what's best for kids, I just really appreciated hearing people ask really tough questions, and I lost my train of thought there. But anyway, I just wanted to thank everybody for engaging in the process. You know what? I did have one question though for Scott, because I think I heard him say it before, but it was coming up again in the comment about property values.
In my 15-year history of doing this, I've never seen a county tax collector or assessor go back and adjust a valuation on a home based on an elementary school assignment. Does that answer your question?
I believe it does. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you all. I don't have a whole lot to add to this, except I want to echo the information that John shared tonight really was a compilation of answers to questions we've received since our February meeting. And, you know, those who are following this issue have probably noticed that the board has not said a lot. We've listened. And in particular, the February meeting was the first time that the public really had an opportunity to come forward and ask questions. And so all of those questions, as promised that night, I followed up with my fellow board members and with John to make sure we got those answers. And I feel like every one of them was answered tonight. So thank you, John. Great job. And the other thing that people probably don't know is the number of questions that John has responded to individually based on, you know, this is my family situation, this is my concern, this is the data I'm looking at. And you know, he's taken those calls, he's responded to the emails, he's met with people in person, and you know, the public doesn't know that, but I want you to know that because he is incredibly responsive and open to feedback. And so again, thank you for that. One of the things that I know I've said before in my tenure on the board is the best part of this job, and also sometimes the hardest part of this job, is that we make decisions that are in the interest of all kids. Not my kids, not any other board members' kids and not the interest of kids that live on a particular street or have a particular issue. We hear all of that and we appreciate you advocating for your kids. But at the end of the day, we have to make a decision that is best for all kids. I believe this is the right decision for all kids. And I also want to take a second to just thank and appreciate my fellow board members. We have not discussed this issue amongst each other even one time in terms of how are we going to vote? How do we feel about some of the public comments that we've heard? And the unified response that I'm hearing tonight is great. I mean, I'm talking, but I don't feel like I needed to talk because everybody that spoke before me said what I felt. So thank you all. Thank you. This has been a hard process, and obviously now is a hard time, but I am so grateful to all of you and so grateful for the opportunity to work with you. So I know we do need a motion, and it is in our packet. So we need a motion to approve the attendance boundary changes and the implementation plan as presented by Dr. Simpson.
Keita, you're muted. Keita, you're muted.
I make a motion, we approve the attendance boundary changes and implementation plan as presented.
Second.
Right. I'd like to do a roll call, but I don't know if Sherry's on. I'm just going to do it if that's okay. So I'm going to start with Keita.
Yes.
Come on, if you want me to do it.
I got it. David,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
and Amy, yes. Thank you all.
Thanks, Amy.
John, you are up next with the, I'm sorry, Pam, you're up next with the administrator salary schedule.
Thank you. So the administrator salary model is in the packet. That's the same model that was developed in 2017 to bring some consistency to administrator salaries throughout the district. So a committee meets every year. They review the model. That committee met again this year. They still feel that the model is fair and it is working. The model also works to align salaries with the other St. Louis County school districts, and the goal is to have the salaries be 3% above the St. Louis County median. Experience is given in the model at 1.5% for the first 8 years, and then at 0.5% for each year of experience for each year after that. For any administrator that is already at that goal, the 3% over the median, their raise would be 2%. So in the past, when the model's been developed, the goal of getting to that 3% above the county median has been stretched out to 2 years. So this year we're recommending, instead of saying we're going to get to this goal in 2 years, we're recommending that we're going to get to the goal next year. So then all of the salaries would be at the 3% over the St. Louis County median. That does mean that their raises will be slightly higher than some of the other groups, but we feel that this is necessary in order to fairly and consistently compensate our administrators. Like I said, this model's been in place since 2017, and each year there's been a 2-year plan to get to the goal. Then each year when the salaries are reanalyzed, that goal or the target moves. So again, it was another 2 years. So our recommendation is that we get to that 3% over the county median goal this year. And just a reminder, the board approved the teacher schedule at the last meeting, and their goal is to be 5% over the county median. So I guess at this time, I'd be glad to answer any questions that the board members have.
David, I believe you're on the administrator salary schedule committee, correct?
I am, yes.
Anything you want to add or?
No, I think Pam's done a great job. I mean, So all I would say is that the model has worked very well. I think that it's a credit to everybody from the teaching and administrative staff, and then also to the trust that they have in Bruce and in Pam, that everybody is comfortable utilizing this model. I think that it demonstrates the fiscal responsibility that is that's required, that's allowed us to keep the district in the financial position we are. So I just say I echo and support everything that Pam has said.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Pam?
I'm just assuming it's financially feasible over the long term as well.
Yes, yes.
All right, I'm not hearing any other questions. Should have a motion. Hang on.
I make a motion.
to approve the attendance boundary change. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong one.
Done that.
I'll motion to approve the administrative salary schedule model for the 2020-21 fiscal year.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, thank you, Pam.
And lastly,
Dr. Simpson, yeah, back to you.
yeah, and I'll invite Sandy to jump on at any point if she would like, but we have upcoming principal interviews for both the middle school as well as Givens and Steger. And we are still getting applicants in for those. The Hickson position closes on, I believe, the 26th, maybe the 27th.
Right. 26.
And the Steger Givens one is sometime after that. And Sandy has kind of taken the lead with her department of kind of rethinking how we're going to do this virtually. So Sandy, anything you want to share?
No, that's exactly right. So Hickson does close on the 26th and Givens closes on the 10th. And we are thinking a lot creatively on how we can accomplish this and maintain that personal connection that we need to make this very critical decision.
Yeah. So we're hoping to, with the Hickson position, be able to bring somebody to you at the first board meeting in April. That's been our goal. And even with this adjusted setting we're in, it's still a goal. And then by the late April to bring the principal recommendation for Givens and Steger for 2021.
So yes, and we will of course need a board member to be present via Zoom, maybe on the final round for both of those. And John we have a definitive timeline for Hickson, and I think we finalized the one for Givens, so those dates can be provided to you at a future time.
So do you need a volunteer for those two teams?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not it. I did it last time.
I was thinking
as much fun as that was.
I was thinking of Keita for Hick. Keita's kind of up if she's interested. Is that your hand, Keita?
Yes.
Good.
Except for Givens.
Keita's up, and Alex hasn't done one yet either. Have you, Alex? If you wanted to, or I'm just throwing it out there, or you can.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Sure, unless someone else is eager to, I'm happy to.
Joe, have you done one?
I have done one. I did the high school.
You did high school, okay.
Okay, well, I will put Keita down for Givens and Alex for Hickson.
Flip that. Keita for Hickson,
Hickson.
and then
No,
Alex.
I would do Givens. If
You
that's
want to do
okay.
Givens?
Yes, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
And then we'll send you dates, and if for some reason those don't work, then we'll go next steps. Next person.
Okay.
Yeah, so currently for Hickson, we have about 24 applicants. And we typically get another flood or so within the next couple of days. And then for Givens, we're sitting at about 11, but they're open until April 10th. So we still have time.
That's it.
All right. I believe that's everything except the consent agenda.
Amy, I will make a motion to approve consent agenda items 7.02, minutes for the following BOE meeting, March 9th. The personnel report, 703, 704, check registers, 705, surplus band uniforms, and 7.06, YMCA contract amendment.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Aye, a second.
All those in favor, aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, virtual high fives to you all for our first Zoom meeting.
Oh.
Thanks, everyone.